funding the roads when this tax doesn't apply to things, as I said, like motorhomes and trailers and things like that. So fortunately, we were able to repeal that and get that pulled out of the bill. So we're very proud of the work that we did there on behalf of recreational boaters. So
and for the average Washington boater, how much did that save in terms of registration fees?
Yeah, so on a one-year basis, we estimated the average savings at around $485.
Wow.
Right. And so if you think about that over 4 or 5 years, it's several $1,000s that we actually save them.
From beautiful Port Townsend, Washington, a Victorian seaport on the Salish Sea, and recorded aboard the Motor Vessel Traveler, it's the Boat Geeks with Darren and Daeron.
We have today with us a very special guest, Mr. Bob Wise, the president of the Recreational Boating Association of Washington, also known as
RBAW.
RBAW.
Which do you hear most often?
Mostly RBAW, because most people don't know what it stands for.
I think I keep wanting to say recreational boaters, but yeah, it's boating. But it is for boaters like us. And you are known as the voice of the Northwest boating, right? That's kind of your tagline or something I saw on the website.
Yeah, people think of us as that. We're mostly known for the work that we do in Olympia. So the voice of recreational boating in Olympia is what people think of.
Okay.
But our mission is actually quite a bit broader than that. And I'm looking forward to talking with you guys today about that.
All right. Excellent. Well, we definitely will get into RBAW. But to start, I would love to know a little bit about your background, just what your background is with boating, maybe the work you come from, and just let us know a little bit about you, Mr. Bob Wise.
Well, I'm a technologist by training, and so I've worked in the software and the networking business for a long time. Most notably, working on voice recognition software with a product called Nuance Communications is the company. They have a product called Dragon Naturally Speaking, which was kind of the foundation for almost all voice technology applications that you see these days, including the ones that are on most mobile phones.
Wow.
I do feel like I've heard that name before. I am in the kind of the technology field myself, and that rings a bell.
Yeah, Microsoft acquired the company a couple of years ago, but it had been around for quite a while, quite a large company.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so what is your boating experience? Have you been a boater your entire life? Growing up,
I came to boating later in life. I was living in the Silicon Valley, wanted to move back to the state of Washington, and I said, "Hey, I want to move back to an island, and I want to buy a boat." and so that's what we did. So my foray into boating started around 2011, and when I bought my first boat, which was quite a process to go through of learning what it takes to operate a boat. It was quite intimidating when I went out and looked at them, because I was up at the helm, and I was like, I'm not sure I can do this.
I do know that feeling. Yes.
Yeah. So purchased the first boat, owned it for 13 years, and actually just recently replaced it about 3 months ago. So I'm now on boat number 2.
Wow.
My wife is absolutely adamant that it will be our last boat.
Never heard that one before.
No, not at all.
But we'll see how that goes.
So what boats were these? What was your first boat?
The first boat was a Tierra Sovereign, and which was a fantastic boat for us, and we've just used the heck out of it. Love the boat. And we took it all over, Washington, British Columbia, taking it several hundred miles north. And just as I said, recently sold it. And it's got a great new owner who is just thrilled with it. And so we're still seeing a lot of the boat, and that's great.
Excellent. And then your new boat?
What do you have now?
Replaced it now with a Riviera. And so a little bit bigger boat now that the family is just a little bit older, and I have 3 daughters, so nice to have lots of extra room on the boat. And so that's what we're cruising in now.
Congratulations.
Excellent. And what is do you have some destinations in mind now that you have a bigger boat? Are you going to go further, or do you have any goals with the new boat?
I don't know if we're going to go further or not. I think it's a great question. I haven't really decided that. Our shakedown cruise was probably a little aggressive because we picked up the boat and 2 days later we took it to Desolation Sound, which was probably not the right thing to do with a brand new boat where you don't know all of the systems. But other than a single head problem, which of course always happens, we didn't have any issues. So we took the boat up. We did a 2-week break-in cruise, brought it back down. We've taken it back to Canada a couple of times. 3 weeks ago, we took it up to the Saanich Inlet, down into Brentwood Bay, which is one of our favorite places to go. So we just had a nice little winter or fall cruise, I guess you would say, into Saanich Inlet, and got the dinghy off, went into the Bouchard Gardens through the back entrance there where you can, which is always fun. Always fun.
Yeah.
And we intend to cruise all winter long, actually. So we're going to be out there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the best parts about boating in Washington, British Columbia, in the Northwest, is we get to go all year long. My wife came from Wisconsin on Lake Superior, and one of the first things she said was, well, when do you pull your boats?
Yeah.
And I didn't know what she meant.
Yeah.
It's like, well, when do you take them out of the water? Because it's going to freeze. So it was interesting for her to get into the whole year-round boating concept, which we take for granted sometimes.
Right, we do take it for granted. Other people right now, they're thinking about, hey, I got to get the boat shrink wrapped.
Yeah.
We don't have to do that here, which is fantastic, right? There's nothing better than a beautiful winter day. In fact, when we were coming over the bridge today, the view of the mountains was just spectacular, right? It's so clear today. And, you get those winter days when the air quality is amazing and you can just see forever.
See for miles.
Yeah.
And the crowds. I mean, you get anchorages, guest docks, all to yourself sometimes, which is great.
Yeah, you can, coming in this morning, the Olympic mountains up there, just beautiful. I joined RBAW this morning to see the process, and so that I could explain that, and we'll get to the member benefits towards the end. Before we get into what you're doing now, which is very significant and important, I did read a little bit of the history, which I thought was fascinating. First of all, it's you're based out of Seattle. RBAW is correct. That's
where our mailing address is.
Okay, mailing address, but you're all based wherever you live. And,
exactly. Yeah, we're an all-volunteer organization. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How many people work for RBAW?
Only one person works for RBAW, and that's actually new. We hired our first executive director this year.
Oh, wow.
Up until that point, it's all been done by boaters. So just people that are doing this all in their spare time.
Yeah, that was the part that really I was really excited about, was that, okay, so you're officially established in 1956, but it was running before that. As the Puget Sound Interclub Association and then the Interclub Boating Association of Washington. But what I love is that it was formed by multiple clubs.
That's right.
And I'm assuming you know some of the history. How did that happen? What was the instigator for the clubs coming together and forming?
Well, the instigator was actually a land development issue in the San Juan Islands. And so at that time, recreational boating, very popular, of course, still is. And the same as it is today, the San Juan Islands was a favorite destination. And there was an island up there called Susha Island that was particularly attractive to recreational boaters. And it was being acquired by developers. And the plan was to develop the island, as you're probably aware if you've been up there. It's quite large, and they were going to put hundreds of vacation homes up there. So it was going to be a lot of cabins. And the clubs at the time, particularly the Grand 14 clubs, which are the larger clubs, but really a large group of clubs came together, about 50 clubs at that time, to raise the money to actually purchase the island and make it a permanent marine park. And so that was really quite something to be done at that time. And so the clubs all came together, they raised the money, they bought the island, and then they donated to the state in perpetuity as a marine park, where it now remains one of the most popular marine parks actually in the United States. So that is how the organization was formed. And then out of that came more advocacy type work on behalf of recreational boating going forward from the late 50s.
That alone was enough for me to join. just the fact now, my family hasn't been to the island yet. They have many times and have told us all about it. And I think that is hugely significant. What an amazing thing to do as RBAW is starting out. And like you said, it is a very popular destination for people in the Northwest. And
it's known worldwide.
Yeah.
Wherever you go, people have heard of Susha Island.
And that would not exist as it is today without the beginnings of RBAW. And 24 clubs founded RBAW originally.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Yeah. Although a number of clubs more than that actually wound up contributing to the purchase of Susha. And we actually have a sign up there naming all the clubs actually that participated in that. And,
That's so great.
Many of those clubs, in fact, the majority of those clubs are still in existence today.
Yeah. And you have over 50 clubs as members of RBAW now.
About 50 clubs. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So amazing. I think that's, like I said, that was enough for me when I saw that you guys did that and purchased it and basically gave it back to the people, which is kind of, a lot of what you're doing with RBAW today is giving back to the boaters in various forms, which we'll get to. But I found that early history just very interesting.
And anytime you go up to Susha Island and if you put in at Fossil Bay and you go ashore, the first thing you see when you step ashore is this big, beautiful sign. And it lists all of the yacht clubs that gave to the Interclub Association in the beginning. And so it's almost like you pay homage when you step foot on Susha Island at that point.
Deserve it. You can look at any of the islands up there now and we could see what Susha Island could have been easily. Right. Not that the other islands aren't beautiful as well and great destinations, they are. But I think that's very special and important to point out. Again, worth my $20 easily for that.
I'd have one little question about Susha, though, that you might have an answer. I've never heard why those two little finger islands in Echo Bay are still private.
Yeah, they're in private hands. We've been approached by the owners before about acquiring them, but just with the location of them, the expense, we didn't think that it really was going to bring anything else that we didn't already have up there.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
It looks like the access is not terribly easy.
It's
to
not
either one of those islands.
It's not easy. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So some of the accomplishments besides Susha Island of the Recreational Boating Association of Washington is essentially you are an advocate for boaters in Washington, and you also lobby the state and the federal government. We're represented in DC as well, right? I think I read that.
We don't have a formal representation contract in Washington, D.C., but as I had mentioned before, we were particularly thought of as the voice of recreational boating in Olympia. But one thing that we found in advocacy work these days is that our footprint has gotten much bigger because we have a lot of issues actually now at the local level and at the state level and at the federal level. So we're actually operating on all three of those right now, which is pretty difficult for a volunteer organization.
Sure.
Hence our decision to hire an executive director this year. But we've had a lot of issues come up in the city of Seattle, particularly with things like Seattle Harbor Patrol, which is, tasked with keeping the 200 miles of shoreline in the city of Seattle safe.
Wow.
And there's been difficulty in staffing that. There's been budget cuts from the Seattle City Council to the Harbor Patrol. They haven't even, in some cases, been able to operate their boats. They don't have enough crew to operate them. And if you think about if you have to come all the way from South Lake Union through the locks to respond to something in the Duwamish waterway, that's an enormous distance. And doing that with a single boat is tough. So that's a good example. We also had a situation that happened about a year and a half ago where there was concern with lakeside homeowners about the noise levels in Andrews Bay. And Andrews Bay is the only place where you can actually anchor in Lake Washington overnight, even though it's a huge lake.
Sure.
So there was going to be a ban on overnight anchoring in Andrews Bay. So we kind of rallied around that. And did an outreach effort to boaters. We got our clubs involved, and they went out there and distributed information to people, asking them to keep the noise levels down, turn your stereos down at night, and just trying to be, better neighbors.
Considerate,
Yeah, just to be more considerate. So those are some of the local levels. And then at the national level, there's been particularly a lot of interest in thoughts about removing the dams on the Snake River and what's that going to do to recreational boating and the moorage facilities that are out there. And so we're getting involved with that. There's also been quite a bit of concern around the ability to rebuild marinas. And people are probably aware that if you compare back to several decades ago, there's actually less moorage available than there was previously. A lot of marinas have been unable to rebuild. The environmental regulations that have been put in place around the Endangered Species Act with an organization called National Marine Fisheries Service has basically taxed marinas as they try to rebuild. Now, we're not talking about new marinas. It's just marinas that want to, renew their docks because, as we all know, they wear out and have to be replaced. Now you actually have to buy environmental credits to do that. And that's a very difficult situation for a lot of both the private marinas, but also affects the public marinas. The port districts are also impacted by these regulations. And so we want to make sure that there's room for us to actually park our boats going forward.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah, we definitely appreciate that. I didn't realize that there were less slips now or moorage available than there was previously. I did learn. I bought my first boat a few slips down a few years ago, and I learned very quickly that every marina has a very long waiting list.
Yes.
Darren was anchored out for almost an entire summer, and it was very anxiety inducing for him.
We always tell prospective boaters that it's easy to buy a boat. It's hard to get a place to moor a boat.
Oh, yeah.
So you actually want to get moorage before you buy a boat, which
Absolutely.
is really kind
Good
of
advice.
counterintuitive to what you would think.
Yeah, I mean, we got lucky, and it's funny because when I first started looking for a boat, I was looking at boats way too big. I didn't know why they were going to be too big, other than, of course, maintenance. But like I was looking at an 80-foot boat and had no idea I would never be able to get a slip or moorage in the Pacific Northwest.
Not right up here.
No, but anyway, that is very much appreciated by us boaters, and another reason to join. Also, something that an issue that I have been aware of, a little bit, is just taxes, registration fees. You have, part of your advocacy has been keeping those low, right? Like, I've basically heard something along the lines of the state assumes all boaters have a lot of money, keep wanting to raise taxes.
Yeah.
So what is your involvement in the taxes and the registration fees and so forth?
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned about, people think that boaters are all rich, right? And everybody's sailing around on big yachts. And that's just really not the case. There's 250,000 recreational boats registered in the state of Washington. 97% of them are on trailers.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a decidedly middle-class activity. And, there's obviously a few people that have very large boats, but it's really the minority. So we do have to counteract that a little bit. The average boat actually costs less than most travel trailers or other types of recreational vehicles people buy. But it also points to this inherent bias that we have in the system around boating, which is very unique, which is that in Washington state, we pay what's called the watercraft excise tax, which is 0.5% of the value of the boat, and it's paid on an annual basis. Now, we're the only type of vehicle or recreational component that actually has this tax. So if you have a camper or a motorhome, you don't pay this tax on a value-based basis on an annual basis. It's only boaters that actually pay this. So we're obviously concerned about that, and we want to make sure that those funds get invested in recreational boating, because up until last year, 100% of those watercraft excise taxes went just into the general fund. And we were able last year to implement legislation which took 25% of that money and actually diverted it to the derelict vessel program.
Oh, wow.
And so the derelict vessel program pulls old boats out of the water that have been abandoned, that are a safety hazard, that are an environmental hazard. And that program also had been funded by recreational boaters. There's a small surcharge on your license tabs every year that go to that fund, but it wasn't nearly enough. We had like 300 boats and more on the derelict vessel watch program that needed to be dealt with. And we could only handle just a handful of them every year with the existing money. So we were able to basically increase the budget for that program by about a factor of 10. And this last year, they've been able to pull a couple of hundred boats out of the water.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I think that's really kind of shows the benevolent nature of boaters, right? That we want to be good citizens. We
good
don't want
stewards of the environment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And if there's bad actors out there, we want to make sure we come along and clean up any messes that are out there. So I'm excited about that. But we have seen a trend to always want to tax boaters more. 2 years ago, we had a situation where they were trying to implement in Olympia. The legislature was working on coming up with a new highways program for $16 billion to improve the roads in the state of Washington. And they had actually put into the bill to fund this was a doubling of the watercraft excise tax. And we thought it was kind of ironic that you wanted to double the watercraft excise tax to pay for roads that we don't use. And we were able to rally the recreational boating community, and we got the word out to our constituents and our members, and we were able to flood the email boxes and the phone banks of the legislature and let them know that, hey, not only are we the only people that pay this tax, it would be kind of ironic to have us funding the roads when this tax doesn't apply to things, as I said, like motorhomes and trailers and things like that. So fortunately, we were able to repeal that and get that pulled out of the bill. So we're very proud of the work that we did there on behalf of recreational boaters. So
and for the average Washington boater, how much did that save in terms of registration fees?
Yeah, so on a one-year basis, we estimated the average savings at around $485.
Wow.
Right. And so if you think about that over 4 or 5 years, it's several $1,000s that we actually save them.
This episode of The Boat Geeks is sponsored by The Boater's Guide, a free app for Pacific Northwest boaters. The Boater's Guide is adventure and information, right at your fingertips, right when you need it. Find your happy place with The Boater's Guide, a free download on your phone or tablet in the App Store and Google Play.
And for all of you out there, if you're not a member of RBAW yet, it is only the basic membership is $20. And as you have heard, we're already being saved significantly more than that. And there's such good causes. And really, it's just, like your purpose is, you're an advocate for the boater. And, to me, the value is just obvious. That's why, like I said, I joined this morning. Nobody pressured me or anything like that, but as I was going through my notes and the website and seeing everything that you do and you've done, it just made total sense to me. And so if you're not a member, I would highly recommend going to their website and joining up. It's totally a worthy cause. Now, another thing that was important to me, I already get so much junk mail, junk calls where, I'll apply for a loan and then my information gets, distributed out there and marketed. I did read something that you keep the boater registration info from being sold or marketed to other companies and so forth.
That's correct. We've been involved in a lot of, again, advocacy work with the legislature and the regulating agencies to make sure that privacy is maintained for boater registration. Which is very important.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of points to the issue. People think that, when you're working with the legislature, it's just when the legislature is in session, which is, just a couple of months out of the year. But really, the work happens year round.
Right.
And meeting with all of those agencies, they are typically lining up and drafting new laws that they want to bring many months in advance. And they are now recognizing that we speak for the recreational boating community. So we tend to get involved with all of those agencies many months in advance and provide our feedback on issues that are going to become before the legislature, and we get down there and we testify on behalf of legislation that we're supportive of, and also ones that we oppose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we appreciate that, and thank you very much for that. That was a big one for me because any like I said, there's just so many things I was checking off that made this that worth it for me. And then you mentioned the derelict vessel removal program. That's huge around here. I mean, it's just every year there's more and more vessels, and I can't imagine the work that is required to clean that all up.
Is there an average cost for the removal of a derelict vessel?
Yeah. Well, it varies so widely,
Sure,
right?
of course.
But the one thing that's most important is it's much easier for us to deal with a boat before it sinks.
Yes.
And the way that the legislation had written in the past is that of the money that they had to spend, only a small amount of it could actually be used for what was called the voluntary turn-in program, where somebody could just say, hey, I've got this boat. I can't afford to maintain it. It's going to sink. I just want you guys to come pick it up and handle it, in a responsible fashion. And so we thought that was really short-sighted. And there was lots of instances where we spent that money the state spent that money in the first few months of a biennium budget, and they could no longer do that. And so then the boat would have to sink. It would become an emergency situation. The cost can easily skyrocket into the tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in these situations. Whereas if it's a voluntary turn-in program and we can actually get it to one of the port districts and have it hauled out, just a few $1,000s, right?
Yeah.
So not very expensive by comparison at all.
Prevention is much easier to.
Yeah. So we had to get, it was written into the law that way. So we had to get the law changed, and we did that. So now that we don't have a cap on the voluntary turn-in program. So if somebody has one of these boats, they can fill out a declaration and just say, I can't afford to take care of it. And it can get put on the list, and it can be pulled out of the water right away.
That is very
Nice.
good information. Yeah, absolutely. And then you also, something that's very important, obviously, is that you support funding for boater safety, education, and with the derelict vessel removal program, environmental issues as well. Do you want to elaborate on any of those?
Boy, there's a lot to be said on
Of
all
course.
of them. Safety is really important. The boater education card that almost everybody has in the state now, we worked on that. There was a couple of really important things that I think we did in relation to the boater education card. Is number one, we wanted to make it a program where you actually learned about safety, and we didn't want to make it a license.
Mm-hmm.
Its original plan was to have you actually have to re-up and pay a new fee every year for that boater education card. We were able to remove that so that it wasn't really just a tax.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in favor of just taxing boaters more. So we think that that's a great program from a safety standpoint, and we're supportive of that, but just remove some of those limitations that were in the earlier law.
I actually enjoyed doing that program and learning. I mean, it was all during my, everything was learning back then for me. But I enjoyed it. I was proud of getting my card, and I think that's super important. And then can you touch on environmental issues? Obviously, the removing the derelict vessels is a big part of that, but what else is happening environmentally in Washington?
I think that the derelict vessel program is actually the most important aspect of
Absolutely.
it. Right? There tends to be a lot of abandoned boats around the state, and just getting them out of the water, making sure that those fuels are removed is extremely important. Just around here in the bays around here, we've had several instances of boats sinking just in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And that's always very difficult when we have to boom those boats. But typically by the time that the Coast Guard or any other agency can respond, the damage has already been done.
Right.
Because once the boats go down, they tend to leak fairly quickly and distribute those fuels and contaminants. So that's our number one priority in relation to that.
Now, don't tell me what the number 2 priority is. I'm guessing. Pumping out.
Pumping out. Exactly.
I saw a video with Bob interviewed, and
right.
Exactly. It was done with humor, but the number 2 priority.
Yes, the number 2 priority. We actually have a fairly robust pump out program in the state of Washington with shoreside pump outs. There are some problems with that program. but we actually have one of the most developed ones actually in the state. But a lot of times people report to us that those systems aren't well maintained, so they'll pull up to a pump out dock and it'll be broken and they can't pump out. The entire Puget Sound is a no discharge zone, so you are not allowed under any circumstances to pump black water overboard. And we're very supportive of that. So we want to just make sure that people have access to working pump outs. There's a couple of places where there aren't a lot of pump outs, and so we're in favor of a great program that we have going now down in the Pierce County area, which is mobile pump out boats. And so seeing those mobile pump out boats is just absolutely a great thing. You can actually schedule it. You're down in a place like Gig Harbor where there's not a lot of pump out access down there. There's one, but a lot of times it gets busy on popular weekends down there. The boats whip into the harbor and can pump out, dozens of boats very quickly and dispose of that waste. And
what is the cost to
it's free.
the boater?
Yeah,
It's free.
Right. It's free.
We're very
right.
lucky here at Ludlow that we have, very serviceable and working pump out, but we also have a mobile boat that I just took advantage of last week that the boat building school, I think, built for us.
Yeah, and we see that particularly in places like the San Juans where, there's a lot of pressure on growth management up there and concerns about the popularity of the islands these days. We would love to see a fleet of boats up there pumping out with things like Seafair Weekend. There needs to be mobile pump out boats for all of the boats that come over there. There's still areas that aren't well served by the pump out system. And then the other issue that we're trying to get handled is the commercial boats don't really have a place where they can pull in, because even in places here at Port Ludlow, you can't bring in a 200-foot commercial boat to pump out. So we're working in conjunction with the Northwest Marine Trade Association for the development of a large-scale pump-out location somewhere here in Puget Sound, where the large boats can come and connect and handle this problem too. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we're making good progress. We're making good progress.
Absolutely.
You're doing the work. So I think what you've already done is hugely significant and important and appreciated. Besides that, a larger pump out facility in the future, what else might be in the future with RBAW? Is there anything else that you're looking to in the horizon to move into, or what's next?
Always new stuff.
There's a couple of new programs that I think are worth mentioning. The one issue that we saw last year was that there's a conflict in places where there's a lot of people on the water at the same time. And we've particularly seen this on Lake Union. And in Lake Union, in the summertime, just the number of people that are coming down on paddle boards and kayaks and floating hot tubs.
I've seen some interesting vessels. Yes.
Right. So there's a tremendous amount of activity. And there were starting to be conflicts with the seaplanes that we saw there. So there's a line of buoys that's actually installed on the lake during the summer months where the pilots, when they're taking off and landing on the lake, can actually control those buoys so that they start to flash a light on top, which lets people know that they should move a couple 100 feet away to allow a seaplane to take off or land.
And it's only a visual signal. There's no audio.
That's correct.
Which I think is interesting.
It's just a visual signal. But what was actually happening is we were seeing boaters actually tie up to the buoys to have parties.
Oh man!
And so that was concerning. And you would think that maybe seaplanes isn't really a mission of the Recreational Boating Association of Washington, but turns out a large number of our members use that seaplane network to get parts up to their boats, to get technicians up to their boats when they're cruising up north, to have passengers fly in and out to meet them on their boats. So it's really an important linkage in the recreational boating area. And there was talk about removing the ability to have seaplanes even land at the lake.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So we came up with a program just to educate people about, hey, you need to make way for these planes when they take off and land. And the word wasn't necessarily getting out. So we created a program called Mind the Zone and talked about the seaplane landing zone where we would just ask people to, step aside for a few minutes when a plane would take off and land. And we sent ambassadors out to talk to all the businesses that were selling and renting paddle boards and kayaks. And we have actually posted informational notices at every place where you can get into and out of the water up there. We created videos and put them up on social media. The video that we put up about the Mind the Zone and to educate people has received over 700,000 views
Great.
in the
That's
last
good.
year. And so that was a program that we did with the state of Washington. The governor's office had actually put up some funding to do that, and RBAW stepped in and has run that program successfully now it'll be our second year, and we're going to do it again this coming summer in 2024, and hopefully it'll continue, because we don't want to have a situation where we have an accident.
Sure.
An accident between floating vessels or a paddleboard and a seaplane would be devastating, and we just want to make sure that nobody gets hurt.
Well, and a plane is not a boat, but it floats, so it's a distant cousin, and so we have to be mindful of all of each other out there on the water.
Think technically, when a seaplane is on the water,
it's a boat.
It's a boat. It's at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of
and
priorities.
When James Bond's car goes in the water and floats, it's a boat at that point. Yeah, and just in terms of safety, safety for boaters. Yeah, like you said, a plane is not something you want to run into out on the water. Great. So it sounds like, past, present, and future, RBAW has been and will be busy.
I think people should go to the RBAW website.
Absolutely.
Which is RBAW.org. RBAW.org.
Right.
We'll show that on the screen. But one thing you'll want to do is I printed out 4 pages of key 2023 legislative and regulatory priorities that RBAW has been working on this year. And it's an exhaustive list.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it as
This is
volunteers.
incredible.
That's
So
amazing.
what will the key 2024 priorities look like? I imagine quite a few of these will
pretty
turn
similar.
over.
Right. I would say the last one that I would just like to mention is going back to the start of our conversation about Susha Island. I felt that it was really important for us to make sure that we continue to preserve boating access. And as you look at the growth in this area in terms of the number of people and the wealth, the ability for us to have a place like Susha Island is dwindling. And so 2 years ago, when thinking about how do we talk about the legacy of RBAW, how do we go back to that, I wanted to do more of that. And so 2 years ago, we actually worked very hard and we purchased what we hope will be the next Susha Island. And that is, we bought a property in South Puget Sound in the Carr Inlet called the Lake Bay Marina. Now, this is a property that has a history going back to the 1880s.
Wow.
It was one of the mosquito fleet stops for farming, particularly agriculture. There were a lot of large egg co-ops down there. And so those eggs would get loaded on mosquito fleet boats and then brought up to Seattle and shipped all over the country.
Oh, that's great.
The marina had fallen into disrepair in probably starting in the 90s, and it continued to deteriorate, but it had been a really terrific little marina out there for recreational boaters. And we were fortunate enough that we were able to acquire that property, and now we're working very hard to completely renovate it and to make it another state marine park. So that's going to take several more years for us to complete, but we did acquire it. We partnered with the Department of Natural Resources on that. So a big shout out to them and the Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz, who bent over backwards to help us acquire that property. We were able to get the grants from the Recreational Boating Office and local governments and from recreational boaters to pay for that. It was about $2 million. It'll take about another $3 to $4 million to completely rebuild it, but we've actually pulled the old docks out of the water now, and we're in the planning phases now with an architectural firm to design the new marina for us there. And it's going to open up an opportunity for recreational boaters much closer than Susha, because it's just south of Tacoma, to go there. And I continue to want to do that. I want to raise the money to do that, that anytime a property like that comes available or an island becomes available, that RBAW is there to actually help acquire it and put it into perpetual trust for recreational boating going forward.
Wow. Yes. Thank you. Now, Lake Bay Marina is essentially adjacent to Penrose Point
It's
State Park.
It's almost adjacent. There's just a
Okay.
couple of lots in between, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's right across the bay from Penrose Point State Park. That's
And
exactly
so
right.
is the plan with Washington State Parks to create a new park or make it part of Penrose?
The conversation that we've had, we've got a three-way operating agreement right now between the Department of Natural Resources and State Parks and RBAW. And the plan is to actually have the marina rebuilt, and then State Parks will take it over, and that their rangers will actually manage the property going forward, much in the same way that you would find it like Blake Island,
Mhm.
and what you would find at Susha too. So that is absolutely the intent to do that. And our agreement with them is that we will get it rebuilt so that we don't put the burden of the maintenance on the State Parks Organization, which has got, significant funding issues of its own. So we'll do that, and we've got a great relationship with them going forward, and hope to find other properties like this.
There is one more issue on the horizon that I would like to just get your thoughts on, and that is in regards to the San Juan Islands. And they're proposing some kind of a pass that you have to purchase to visit the islands.
Yeah, we read that. It's I believe it's the Hotel and Occupancy Board of San Juan Islands is concerned about growth management. They're concerned about the number of visitors coming to the island. RBAW did respond to their public request for comment on their plan. Their plan is to create a pass or a tax on every car, bike, person, and boat
Wow.
that wants to come to the San Juan Islands. That seems kind of hard to manage from our perspective. And I guess, we have some concerns about that, that I would just say we have a lot of concerns about
Sure.
that.
Yeah, we all do.
We
love to go to the San Juans.
Right. We all want to go to the San Juans. We don't want to overtax it. If you actually look at the data, though, their data shows that actually the number of visits by boaters has actually gone down in the last several years. So we're not sure how difficult the problem is up there from the boating standpoint. We can't speak to the issues that they have with the number of Airbnbs up there and housing and all the other things that are incorporated into this plan. But we don't want to see every county starting to create their own tax system where you have to have a pass to visit any county, because we assume that once the San Juans do it, that Jefferson County will want to do it, and King County will want to do it, and everybody will want to do that. And that just seems hard and difficult for us to manage. And we were also just concerned about people accessing Susha Island, because Susha Island is part of the San Juans, and we think we have an agreement to gift that to the state, and we don't want to put any barriers for people that want to visit that.
Well, we appreciate that. You're out there fighting the fight for all of us boaters. To me, it's a no-brainer, absolutely, and that's why I joined. And again, for all of you out there, if you've been considering it, if you haven't heard of RBAW, it's RBAW.org is a website. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And totally worth go there, check it out, check out the history, who's involved, what they've done, what they're doing, and if you can, sign up. It's worth it. If everything that we've already mentioned doesn't make it worth it enough, some of the other member benefits are discounts on Boat US and fishery supplies, and and a few other things that you have discounts for members. And then, of course, it supports the organization and everything that you're working towards.
Yes.
So we really appreciate the work that you're doing. We appreciate you being here for the podcast, and we hope we can continue to support, everything that RBAW is doing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bob.